what makes a day on the water great? Is it really about how many fish you catch? I mean, I know we're going fishing to catch fish, but is that really all a day on the water is about? I think a lot of anglers would say no. They appreciate the quiet, the solitude, the beauty, and the challenge of it. But at the end of the day, if you're walking back to your truck and you got skunked, you feel like you failed, right? Or at the very least, that you got defeated. Now, I'm not here to say that catching fish doesn't matter, and I'm certainly not telling you what to do. I just want to ask one question. Is the number of fish you catch really the best way to measure success on the water, or is there more to it? That's what we'll discuss on today's episode of Untangled. This is Untangled, fly fishing for everyone, presented by Ventures Fly Co. Hey everybody, welcome to it. This is Untangled, and I am your host, Spencer Durant. I got a hot take to start the show out today, and that is that I think us fly anglers as a group put too much emphasis on counting how many fish we catch. That's our measuring stick for success for a day on the water. And the immediate reaction to that is probably, well, yeah, we're going fishing. Shouldn't how many fish we catch be the measuring stick? That makes sense, doesn't it? And I get it. I do. Catching fish is mostly what fishing's about and fly fishing's about. But I would argue that if we were all in this to catch as many fish as we possibly could, and that was our goal, we wouldn't be fishing with fly rods. We would be fishing with conventional tackle, with bait, with worms, with nets, something that's more efficient and more effective at covering water and putting stuff in front of fish quickly than a fly rod. Because a fly rod's not the most effective and efficient way to fish a lot of different situations. It's a ton of fun, but it's not necessarily the most effective way to go about catching fish. And that's why, as a sport, I think we need to move past using the number of fish we caught as the standard of success for a day on the water. Because once you do pick up that fly rod, once you start committing to that style of fishing, I think you are tacitly accepting anyways the fact that it's less about how many fish you catch and about how you catch the ones that end up in your net. That's what really matters. Okay, because again, we're not fly fishing because it's the most effective way to put fish in the net. We're fly fishing because it's a method of angling that we really enjoy, and we get something out of it that we don't necessarily get out of conventional angling or whatever it is. It just scratches that itch for you. And just to really drive this point home, I'll tell you all a little story. And then I'll follow it up with how I think we should be looking at our time on the water, the mindset that I think would benefit the fish, the fisheries, and all of us if we adopted it. So earlier this month, I went out for my first ever saltwater fly fishing trip. And I went out with my buddy Max. We decided we'd go down to the Florida Keys and go chase tarpon. So I really was like, hey, I'm going to go saltwater fly fishing. Let's try one of the hardest things to catch on a fly and go after them. I don't know why I decided to start with tarpon, but that's just what ended up happening. The nice thing is, though, that Max he's an incredible angler, really good friend, really good at saltwater fly fishing. So he's a great guy to learn from. He has his own skiff, just a really good dude who's more than happy to teach me and take me out and put up with my many deficiencies as an angler for a few days. And I do know that tarpon fishing can be tough, and I knew that going into this trip. I know a lot of folks will hold chasing tarpon up there as one of the toughest things you do on a fly rod, right next to permit and some of those other more obscure saltwater species that are just really tough to get to eat. But all I was really looking to get out of this trip, I wanted a taste of what tarpon fishing was like, and I wanted a shot at a tarpon. If the fish didn't eat, if I screwed up the cast, if I screwed up the hook set, if every tarpon I did hook jumped and threw the hook, which happens pretty frequently with tarpon, before the trip, I was like, I'll be okay with that. Cause really, I want to experience it. I want a chance. I want an opportunity. And this is my first time on a dedicated saltwater trip. So I'm not going to be asking for, the 200-pound tarpon to christen my saltwater adventures. So I tried to have my expectations in line, but they were very much centered around, I need to catch a tarpon. Okay. So we get down to the Keys. We wake up. We got down really late, and we wake up the next morning, crack of dawn. We get up to head out and open the door of the little Verbo we were staying in, because I've sworn off Airbnb at this point. It's just dumping rain. Like, we had to get our rain gear on. It was that bad. Max looked at the forecast before we left and said, hey, pack your rain jacket and your bibs because it's going to be wet. So it was just coming down, wasn't stopping. And then on top of the rain, the wind decided to show up. So the wind's blowing pretty hard. And with tarpon fishing, especially, you need to be able to see the fish, because you need to see what direction they're swimming. You need to be able to land the fly. Max was telling me, try and shoot for 30, 35 feet in front of the fish. And then you need to be able to bring it back in front of them as they're swimming. And you do need to see, you'll feel some of the eat, but you also do need to see some of the eat as well. It's a very visual form of saltwater fly fishing. And there's really not a lot of success in blind casting for tarpon with fly rods. With other gear, yeah, you can do it, but with fly rods, not as much. So visibility is really an important thing. And with the dumping rain and the wind, there was no big sunlight to light up the flats. The wind was making the chop on the ocean terrible. So we just had no visibility. We couldn't see squat that first day. We ended up just busting out the conventional gear and fishing anyways for some stuff. We threw some stuff around for barracuda, and I hooked into one. That was really cool. It was a pretty decent barracuda, but it jumped and threw the hook before I could get it to the boat. So that kind of sucked. But then we did hook into a couple of sharks. That was really fun. I could not believe how powerful those sharks were. That easily the most powerful fish I've ever hooked into. And like, I knew it. I knew that a shark, when I hooked into it, it's going to rip line off, and I'm going to be like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. But until you experience it, until you experience something like that, it's just mind blowing. And these were small sharks too. They were only like 4 feet long. So it was a mind bending experience for a trout guy from the Rockies, whose most exotic fishing to this point had been the Everglades for little 10-inch Oscar fish and Mayan cichlids. Hooking into a shark was mind blowing. Just how they can pull and how much power they've got. But anyways, the sharks were fun. Didn't really get to fly fish at all that first day. Didn't even see a tarpon. It was like, okay, well, whatever. Not a big deal. We've got 3 days. We'll wake up the next day. We had some good food that first night, so I was still feeling optimistic. We get up the next day. The skies are clear. It's bright. It's sunny. It's gorgeous. We've got that part of the visibility down, but as we head out to the Atlantic Ocean side of the Keys instead of the Gulf side, which they're referred to as like the back country, because there's a lot of little keys back there, and then the ocean side, there's really nothing else between the Bahamas and Cuba and those islands. So we head out to the ocean side instead of the Gulf side. And as soon as we get out of the Keys, we turn into the ocean to go to a couple of the flats. That wind just starts ripping again. Well, okay, whatever. We've got the visibility from the sun. We're going to do this today. We find a flat. It looks good. We know there should be tarpon there. So we've anchored up. Max is on the polling platform. He's looking around. I'm looking. I don't know what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the shadow of a tarpon, and I've never seen one before. So I'm just trying to look for something to be helpful. We're sitting there, we're staring, we're trying to find something, but the wind is blowing so hard. The waves are crashing against the boat. It's like you're on the worst kind of amusement park ride. I've been very lucky. I don't get seasick, but trying to keep your balance, trying to make sure you can fly cast like that. Never having done that, been in those kind of conditions before, it was pretty overwhelming for me. In that water, the chop was so bad because the wind was so bad that it was really tough to see any tarpon at all. Max did think he saw one, and I threw a cast out towards where he saw it, and on the last cast to get my fly out there. I do my double haul, and the fly just comes shooting and boom, digs right in the back of my head. So I had to pull the hook out of the back of my head, and then I got blood all over my favorite sun hoodie. So that was great. But anyways, we decided after like 3 hours of getting beat up by the wind and not seeing fish, because we don't even know if the one that Max saw was actually a fish or not. We decided, all right, we're going to head back into the Keys. The wind is going to be broken up a little bit by all those islands, the mangroves. Maybe we'll find some places where the visibility is better, the casting's a bit easier. We'll have a better shot at some fish. So we do that, but it was still so windy and so choppy that we were having a hard time seeing. Even Max, he's done this before. He knows what he's doing. He's having a hard time seeing much anything at all. And we found this other flat. We start pulling around. We're looking for more tarpon. We actually spooked one. We got too close to it before we saw it, and it just scampered off. It was big. I couldn't believe, that was my first one seeing. It was probably 30, 40 feet away. It was an enormous fish. I was just like, holy crap, I can catch that on a fly rod. It was, it was like the size of your mom almost. It was that big. It was really cool to see that fish, but it was just really tough. Okay. And then the rest of the day, we didn't see anything else. No more tarpon. We fish all the way to dark. It's all right, whatever. We got one more day. We go get some more good food. We'll wake up that next morning. Wind is gone. Skies are clear. This is it. This is our chance at glory, at immortality, at the triumph that we all dream of. And we drive. We're going to head back north, back towards the mainland. We're going to fish a different part of the Keys where we'd heard, yes, there's a lot of tarpon here. You will see them. Whether they eat or not, it's a different story, but you will see fish. So that sounded great to us. Well, we pull up to the boat ramp on the island that we were going to fish, and it's closed for construction for a new dock. And apparently, in the Florida Keys, there's like 5 public boat ramps, and the rest y'all got to pay to access, which is really interesting. So we're like, no big deal. We'll go find a different ramp. But every single ramp that we were going to go launch off of on that particular key, they were all owned by a resort, and the resort didn't have any truck and trailer parking. It was just, here's a boat ramp, and if you stay here with us, you can park your truck and trailer at one of our cottages. But if you're not staying with us, we don't have any truck and trailer parking for you. So we had nowhere to park the truck and the trailer so we'd go out and fish. And we went around all of that key. We went around to the next key. Nobody had truck or trailer parking. No one would even give it to us. We offered to pay. Just nothing was happening. So we literally had no way to get on the water. The conditions are perfect. Absolutely no way to get on the water with it. And that really just kind of ended it. We ended up just driving back north and fishing some fresh, brackish water, south of Miami for a little bit before he dropped me off to go to the airport. So the trip ends with me seeing one tarpon, didn't even get a cast at a tarpon at all. And then, I just basically just spent 3 days staring at the ocean. A lot of windshield time. Not the worst way for a trip to go, but it's certainly the exact opposite of what I expected. I expected an opportunity, didn't get it. And I think if we just looked at that trip objectively, I think you could say it was a failure because we didn't accomplish what we set out to do. We didn't catch tarpon at all. And, I'll be pretty honest, I was pissed at the weather, the boat ramp closures. It was just like every little thing that could go wrong on this trip did go wrong. Because one of the nights that we were fishing conventional gear when it was raining and we couldn't see, I caught a jack and I go to take it off the hook and it flops. And it's just the worst situation. It flops and digs the treble hook of the jigging spoon past the barb all the way to the bend into my hand. So I've got this hook connected to a jack, which is flopping around like, a toddler hopped up on Mountain Dew, flopping around like that, just ripping into my hand with the hook. So we had to get into like surgery mode and get the hook out. And it was a whole other thing, but like little body blows like that, just every little thing that could not go well did. And I was legitimately upset with how a lot of that panned out. But here's how this story ties into what I mentioned at the beginning of the show. So I promise I'm bringing this full circle for y'all. I learned a ton from this trip. Even though I did not get to cast at a tarpon, even though I only saw one tarpon, I think it's a successful trip for me, because what I really want out of my time on the water at this point is I want to learn something and I want a good experience. Now, part of that good experience definitely is catching some fish. But at this point, those are the two big priorities for me when I go out fishing. And, 10 years ago, I would have been pissed. I would have been behind this mic just screaming like, I can't believe it. What's a guy got to do to catch a breaker ender? Why is everybody hating me? I would have been absolutely miserable to be around 10 years ago if I'd done this trip. And that's because for a long time, I tied a lot of my self-worth as an angler. And then at that time, I was making most of my living from writing fishing stories and gear reviews. So I tied a lot of my self-worth as an angler and then as a fishing writer to how many fish I caught, because great anglers always catch fish. And if I was going to be a good fishing writer, I needed to be a good angler. And how could I, not catch fish and be a fishing writer? It just didn't compute in my head, because, the great guys, they never have tough days ever. They just always figure it out. And the number of fish that I caught on a given day, that was the only thing that mattered to me. It's all I cared about for the longest time. And to be completely honest, I burned out on that approach. I got to the point where I couldn't keep fishing that way anymore. And I actually remember I was on this trip. I was with my buddy Mises Mike, and we gone to fish this tailwater. We were there for 2 or 3 days. I got my butt kicked. I think I caught like one fish in 3 days of fishing. Really tough time. And we're driving home, and I told Mike, I was like, dude, I'm done. I retire. I'm sick of this. I'm not doing this anymore. And he thought I was kidding around. But I wasn't, because I got home and I legitimately boxed up like half of my fishing stuff. I had the Facebook Marketplace. I don't even know if Facebook Marketplace was a thing back then. I had the classified ads, listing written. I was ready to just hit post and sell it all and be done. I was that mad and frustrated with it. But thankfully, I cooled down. I didn't do that. But that really was the tipping point for me when I realized that, hey, if I keep chasing numbers of fish, eventually I'm going to get to a point where I'm never going to be satisfied with, I'm never going to be happy with a day of fishing, because let's say I chase that. That's the only thing I care about. I get really good at catching a lot of fish. Eventually you're going to reach a point where you can't catch more than that, right? There's only so many fish you can physically catch, unhook, and release safely and ethically during a day of fly fishing. So eventually I was going to burn out on it. And that realization hit me, and I realized I've got to take something else out of this. It can't just be all numbers focused for me anymore. And that's evolved over the last decade or so to the point where, I can go on this tarpon trip and admit the fishing was awful. It sucked, and it was really frustrating. I'm still mad about it. I still wish I would have caught a fish. I still wish I would have had a chance of catching a fish, but I'm legitimately stoked that I went and did it, that I had that experience, because I learned a couple of important things. Number one, I don't think I'm nearly as close to being ready to be a saltwater angler as I thought, and I don't know if I'm cut out to do it consistently either. That was something I realized after that trip. Like, it is so much more demanding than any other kind of fly fishing I've ever done before. I don't know if I've got the mindset to pull it off. I enjoy it, but I don't know if it's ever going to be something I will do consistently. My distance casting with heavy rods, large flies is atrocious. I've really got to work on that. I really need to spend some time at a local park just casting a 9 or a 10 weight and really fixing that skill deficiency of mine. And then, I also learned and realized on that trip that my expectation of what saltwater fly fishing was way off the mark. Because I did have this notion that we were going to see a lot of fish, and that seeing fish, finding them wasn't going to be the issue, but the big problem was going to be, hooking them and getting them to fight or getting them to eat the fly. That was going to be the tough thing. Honestly, it's both. Okay. Finding the fish and getting the fly to them is way more work than trout fishing, much harder than trout fishing in a lot of ways. So I really am glad that I had this trip to learn those two things. And then that experience of being in the Keys was amazing. We went to No Name Pub, which is a super famous place in the Keys. Had some great onion rings there. We had some good food. We got to, go around a couple of the fly shops. We got to just experience what it's like down there. The Keys is its own world unto itself. It's a really interesting place. It was really cool to see. We got to see all those sharks, which was awesome. I was stoked on that. There was just a lot of cool things that we got to experience and see that I don't see in the Rockies. That was new and unique and different. And I'm very glad that I had those opportunities. So yes, I could be upset that the tarpon part of the trip didn't pan out. And again, I'm definitely bummed about that, but I do want to catch tarpon. I'm going to go back. Max and I already have plans. I'm going to go back next year. I'm going to try and get some revenge. But I'm really happy that I got to learn what I did. And I'm just going to build that into my next trip. So to bring this full circle, I think this is why using the number of fish that we catch as the measuring stick for success, I think it's inaccurate. And I think we do ourselves a disservice. And I think we do the entire fishing industry itself a disservice when that is the only thing we care about. When most guides are focused on how many fish can I put in the boat a day for my client versus what experience can I create for these anglers? What can I teach them? What can I help them learn in their fishing journey? What can I do to make this an unforgettable day on the water? Those are two diametrically opposed viewpoints and ways to look at the water. And I think we definitely, this will probably be a podcast in the future where we can talk about, do we focus on numbers too much on, guided trips? Because is that good for the fish? Is that good for the fishery to where you've got 30 guide boats out, everybody's focused on, all right, let's get 50 fish in the boat a day. Can the resource really handle that? What's that going to look like 10, 15, 20 years from now? Are we really still going to be dependent on stocked rivers to catch a lot of these fish? Are we going to lose wild fisheries? Can they stand up to that sort of intense pressure and just single-minded focus on numbers? That's all that matters. Put them in the net versus the entire experience, which is, I would argue, what draws a lot of us to fly fishing in the first place is the entire experience. You probably watched someone cast a dry fly or fight a fish on that ridiculously long rod and thought, that looks like fun. Not, I want to catch a million fish doing that, but what that angler is doing looks like fun, and I want to try having that kind of fun. Right? That's probably how a lot of us got into this. So I would just urge us to not lose sight of that and remember that, hey, if we can have that great experience, if we learn something, that's just as successful as, if we caught 30 fish or not. Now, part of my great experience, I want to catch a couple, but I say this jokingly in some of our videos, if you watch them, and I'm sure I've said it on the podcast. Alex and I, the guy here at VFC that's in all the other videos with me, we go out fishing. I catch, one or two, and I'll always make some kind of comment after, like, all right, I'm good. And I legitimately am. Like, I've caught my couple of fish. I'm fine. I'm happy for the rest of the day. I'd love to catch more. I'd love to see what else I can do. I'd love to get into a great dry fly hatch, and I'd love to find a picky fish and work it until I figure out what it's eating. I'd love to do that. But I've caught a couple. I'm really happy. I came out, I fished. And that's the point that I've gotten to where I can just be happy with what happens and have that experience and look for that. So again, not saying that I'm like some sort of enlightened monk. I went to Wyoming and now I understand the way the world works. And if y'all don't fish like me, you're just not on this plane of existence. That's not it at all. What it is just realizing, hey, this is the meaning I take out of it. This is what I originally started doing this for. And I would just urge the rest of y'all to think about that. What did you really get into this for? Is it all about numbers or not? Okay. And then maybe do some thinking, do some reflecting on what is a great day for me? What else do I want to get out of it besides just putting a fish in the net? I think you'll surprise yourself. I think you'll start to notice more of it. And I think you will start to take more out of your time on the water. So just my 2 cents. Hopefully y'all enjoyed that part of the show, but it is time to move into the Q&A portion of this week's episode. Because every week here at Untangled, we spend half the show directly answering questions from listeners and viewers just like yourself. So if you've got a fly fishing question that you would like answered, there is a link to send those into us down in the show notes, or there's a QR code here on the screen if you are watching the video podcast. Sam from Colorado has got our first question, writes in and says, I've been fly fishing for 6+ years. I'm embarrassed that I have to ask. I avoid split shot whenever possible, but in my closest water, deep, dark pockets are mandatory. If I don't know how deep the water is, how do I dial in the weight? Second, when putting on split shot, how do I decide how far from my indicator/lead fly to put it? Sam, this is a good question, and definitely don't feel embarrassed about it, man. A lot of folks have this question. So when I'm not sure how deep to go and I'm setting up a nymph rig, just to play it safe, I'll just set my nymph rig up like usual, right? One nymph on top, another nymph about 18 inches below that. So the bottom of my rig, I've got one fly 18 inches below it. I've got my next fly. And then I do opt for those heavy nymphs, and I try to avoid split shot just like you do as well. And then what I'll do, again, if I'm just not sure, I'll just go about 6 to 7 feet above that first fly. That's where I'm going to stick my indicator, just to start, just to see what's going on. And then if I'm getting snagged on the bottom, I know that I need to move the indicator down because I'm too deep. If my flies are just ripping through the water, I know I'm not deep enough and I need to move my indicator up or maybe even add some tippet. Might even need to add some weight at that point if I do that. And then if I, set that up first and then I can feel my flies just kind of ticking the bottom a little bit, that's when I know, okay, I've set that up correctly. And we're good to go. So that's the general 10,000 foot view of how to know how deep to make it is just pick a depth to start with and then adjust off of that. The 6 to 7 feet seems to work really well for me for a lot of the rivers that I fish. But it might be a little bit different for you. You talk about really deep dark holes, so maybe you need to start off at 8 feet from your fly or something like that. But just play around with it. Okay? Eventually you'll figure that part of it out. If I'm not touching bottom at all, if I'm still not down deep enough, let's say I've my indicators all the way up at my fly line, I've put on 2 feet of tippet, and I'm still not touching bottom. That's when I'm going to say, all right, it is time to either go to a heavier fly or I am going to need to bust out some split shot at that point. That's going to tell me, all right, it's time I need to get heavier so my flies sink quicker and get down to that strike zone. But really it is just a lot of trial and error, finding the right depth. We get a version of this question a lot. Folks want to know well, what do I do? How do I do it? And it's really just go out there and try. That's the best way, to develop the skill of, because eventually you do this enough, you can look at a run and eyeball it and think, oh yeah, it's about that deep. And that's not some sage skill that you've got to, make some journey to and barter part of your soul for it from some, reclusive bearded angler guy living in a cave next to a river. It's nothing crazy like that. It's just something that you'll eventually get used to. And then you fish your local rivers enough. You really know, okay, yeah, it's this deep this time of year. It's this deep this time of year. That stuff really starts to just become almost like muscle memory. It's kind of the best way to describe it. So the more you do it, the better you're going to get at it. So don't feel like you're behind the 8 ball or anything. It's just something that does take a decent amount of practice. But as far as where to put the split shot, when you do need to add it to your rig, if your flies just aren't getting deep enough, I like to put all my split shot about 12 inches above my first fly if I'm doing a rig where they're in tandem like that. But there's also really no rule about that. Other than that, I have found that the closer my split shot is to my flies, the easier it is to cast that rig and that setup. It's just less clunky. So I do try to keep them about a foot away if I'm doing a tandem rig like this. The other nice thing you can do as well is do a triple surgeons or a blood knot 12 inches above your flies, and then put your split shot there so that they slide down to that knot. They don't slide all the way down to your flies, because if you got them resting right on top of your flies, the fly's not going to drift correctly. It doesn't look right. The fish really aren't going to move forward at all at that point. The other option that you've got as well with that is to just go ahead and do a bounce rig instead of a tandem nymph rig, where you have all your weight down at the very bottom, and then you've got your flies coming off on tags off of the main piece of leader. That's a very effective way to get your flies down deep quickly. It's just the way that rig's set up, it sinks like a rock. So if you're really struggling, maybe look into that setup as well. It can be pretty helpful. But hopefully that answers your question, Sam. Thanks a bunch for sending it on in. John from New Mexico has our next question, writes in and says, foremost, thank you for explaining the art and science of fly fishing into common language that everyone appreciates and can use. I'd like to hear your thoughts and insights on hook sharpness. I noticed that true barbless hooks appear to have a longer and more pointed tip than standard barbed hooks. Once the barb is crimped, the hook is still shorter and not as pointed as the true barbless hook. Do you think sharpening the crimped hook would allow the hook to embed itself into the mouth of the fish, hence reducing the number of LDRs, long distance releases? Thanks again to you and Alex. John, that's a good question. I have honestly never thought about it this way before, so I appreciate you sending it in. But I have noticed the same thing. Excuse me. I have noticed the same thing you have, which is a lot of the hooks, if you're buying flies to tie yourself, or if you're buying flies from a fly shop or whatever, and they're tied on barbless hooks, they're usually made with, I think Umpqua calls it like the super point. I don't know what the corollary is in the other hook brands, but basically they make it with a longer, sharper point when it's barbless versus a barbed. I want to say it's almost like a marketing gimmick, like to give you the confidence and, oh yeah, well, it's a super point. So even though it doesn't have a barb, it's still going to hold the fish, because barbed versus barbless hooks, they hold the fish. In fact, I would argue a barbless hook holds better because the hook gets deeper into the fish. The barb, yes, it does prevent it from sliding out a little bit, but it doesn't dig in near as deep as a barbless hook because the barb stops it from going in that much further. The barbless hooks, they get much deeper penetration. The issue with barbless that folks have, of course, is if you let any tension off the line during the fight, it is a lot more likely for that fly to slip out because there's nothing holding it in there. So you have to be much more attuned to how you're fighting the fish with a barbless hook versus a barbed hook. But I think your hookup, just the hookup itself, is better with a barbless hook than a barbed hook. So that's just my two cents on that. And the other, so that's my 2 cents on it. But to answer your question, I really, if you tie your own flies, you're quickly going to find that not every size and style of hook that you want to use comes in some kind of barbless form. And then if you're buying a lot of your flies, not everyone sells barbless. We'd love to sell barbless here at VFC too, but it's hard to convince people that barbless hooks and everything are fine because that's still not something that's caught on mainstream. So when you go to crimp those barbs down on your hooks, because we do recommend crimp barbs on every fly that you get, because it is easier to take out of the fish and it is way easier to take out of you. Remember I mentioned I got that treble hook stuck all the way past the barb into my hand. I thought I was going to cry like a little baby when Max had to take it out of my hand. So there's a lot that goes into why I dislike barbs so much. But when you go to crimp those barbs down, I have not ever thought about, I've not ever noticed any difference in sharpness between a barbed hook with the barb crimped down versus a true barbless hook itself. And then again, to go to the issue with the long distance releases, the LDRs that you talked about, again, it really doesn't have anything to do with how sharp the hook is or whether it was a barbed versus barbless hook before you crimp the barb down. It all comes back down to tension. Okay? If you slip up on the tension at all during the fight with that fish, it's much more likely that hook is going to come out if it's barbless. I do know that there are some anglers out there who swear by carrying a hook hone, and they will sharpen up their hooks every few drifts or so. Especially the competitive anglers are doing that. They'll say that, your hooks are bouncing against rocks, against trees, they're hooking into fish. Of course they're going to get dull, then they're not going to stick into fish as effectively. I just have a hard time thinking that it's making that much of a difference, because I don't know of a way that we can quantify, yes, I missed X amount of fish because of a dull hook and not because I was early or late on the hook set. I think human error is far more likely to be the culprit of missed fish or a hookup that's just not that good than whether the hook is sharp or not. There's so much potential for us to do it incorrectly that I think it's far more likely that we didn't do it right than that the hook didn't hold. It's really, really hard for me to think that, we've got to sharpen these hooks, and I've got to have this hook cone. It just doesn't really compute for me. If someone's got some quantifiable data we can go through and look at it and you prove to me, then I'd love to change my mind. But just where I'm at right now, I think this is one of those classic, you're overthinking it a little bit. And don't worry about it. Crimp the barbs down, fish barbless, but don't really worry about it. Hook's a hook. You're setting it with a lot of force anyways. I think as long as you got a good hook set, you got a tight line to your fly when you set the hook, I think you're going to be just fine. So again, it's just my 2 cents. Plenty open to being wrong, but hopefully that helps. Appreciate it. Thank you. Crystal from Utah has our next question, writes in and says, I keep getting stuck on the bottom and losing flies. I lost 3 perdigones and a stonefly in 45 minutes. Am I doing something wrong? Crystal, you're not. That is just the tax that we all pay. Some of us more than others. Some days, all you catch are trees and rocks. Some days, all you catch are fish. So it all evens out at the end of the day. I wouldn't say you're doing anything wrong, kidding aside. I would say you're probably just not making the adjustments that you need to fish your rig effectively. You mentioned you're stuck on the bottom, you're losing flies. That makes me think, all right, you're fishing a nymph rig probably. So if you are consistently getting stuck on the bottom of the river with your nymphs, that means your nymph rig is set up a little bit too deep. So what you need to do at that point is you need to move that indicator down closer to your flies. Because ideally, as your nymphs are drifting through a run or a hole or whatever, you want your flies to just kind of be bouncing right along the bottom. You don't want to be getting snagged up every cast. If every single cast you're getting snagged up, that's your giveaway that you're too deep. If you are not snagging or catching bottom at all, then you're too shallow. You want to be kind of just ticking the bottom. If you're hooking up into the bottom every 5, 6, 7 casts or so, that's a good sign that you're just about at the right depth. You really want to make sure, again, that as you're adjusting this, though, as you're trying to dial in that right depth, make some small adjustments, okay? Don't move that indicator like 3 feet. Just move it 5 inches. And then if you're still getting hung up, move it another 5 inches and keep moving it, small little adjustments until you dial in that perfect depth and that perfect drift. Okay? That's a really good gauge that your flies are where they need to be on the bottom, and that they're deep enough, but they're not getting hung up. And then the last thing that I'll say as well is that you talk about, your perdigones and your stoneflies. Those 2 nymphs are really designed to sink very quickly. They're designed to get down to that strike zone and stay there. They're very heavy flies compared to some of the other nymphs. So part of that might be like if you're fishing water that's not very deep, like it's only 2 to 3 feet deep, the flies themselves might be a little bit heavy. You might need to go to a smaller fly or just different pattern altogether, because it might be really hard to not catch bottom with those flies, regardless of how you set your nymph rig up, just because those flies are designed to really excel in that faster, deeper stuff where you need to get down and stay deep for as long as possible. So it's just something else to think about. But again, you're not doing anything wrong. You just need to work on adjusting your rig, make those small adjustments, and then just continue working through that adjustment until you dial it in and start catching fish. So hopefully that's helpful, Crystal. Appreciate you a bunch. And that wraps up the Q&A portion for for this week's show, but we are going to end like we always do with the Live Real Life moment. We love to hear the stories that y'all are up to, see the adventures, see the pictures that y'all are up to. So if you've got a Live Real Life moment that you would like to share, there's a link to send those in down to us in the show notes or right here on the screen if you're watching the video podcast. And Reed has this week's Live Real Life moment, writes in and says, "The condensation covered my cooler chilled can of Diet Coke as the sun was beaming down." Just kidding. This story is one that has happened to me recently that will forever be a memory I will never forget. I've recently reached the point of my fly fishing addiction to start tracking down the fish I've added to a bucket list over the years. I recently had the opportunity to head to Montana and try my hand at a wild Arctic grayling in the lower 48 with my dad. The float itself was roughly 14 miles, and through each hole, ripple and seam, let me restart that sentence for us here. The float itself was roughly 14 miles through each hole, riffle, and seam as a search for this rare beauty. The trip did not disappoint at all. Together we caught 6 mountain whitefish, 6 eastern brook trout, 16 browns that averaged 18 to 19 inches, and a rainbow. As I stated before, I was on a mission to get the grayling. It was time to re-rig and put on the double dry, a small chubby as a point fly and a caddis. It was around the next bend we anchored and observed a few fish breaking the surface. It was at this moment something just felt right. I took a sip of the Diet Coke and cast it out. Mend after mend, I achieved the most epic drift, and boom, a fish took the caddis. I started stripping the line, and to my amazement, it was the grayling. We grabbed the net and landed it. I was so excited, I jumped into the water and celebrated a memorable moment with my dad. I know we all have those moments of solitude, or that moment where everything stands still and you're just stuck in that perfect moment. It is a story of hard work, determination, and patience. I have heard you guys talk about observation to see what is going on in or around the water, and it paid off. Thank you guys. Keep up the great podcast. Reed, I love it. Even though I butchered part of reading your story, thank you so much for sending that in. Grayling are really fun fish to catch. I love them. And I'm really stoked that you got to go catch a few of them as well. They're such a cool stinking fish. And they're always so willing to eat dry flies. That's probably why I love them so much. But anyways, thanks again, man. And thank you all for being here, for listening and watching to this show all the way to the end. It means more to us than you can know. If you would like to help us out even more, please tell everybody you know about VFC and Untangled. Let them know. Share the smoke signals. Send it, blast it out on the Carrier Pigeon Network. Let everyone know about this show. And then make sure you rate and subscribe to it as well. You're wherever you're listening to it, because that does more to help us reach folks and help them live real life, which is the whole goal of what we're doing here at VFC. So until next week, everybody, get out on the water, enjoy yourselves, and live real life.